there. My name is Katherine Schwab. I'm an assistant managing editor here at Forbes covering technology, and I'm so excited to be here today with Eli Greenfield, the CTO of Adobe. We are going to talk all about AI and Adobe's AI efforts. So, Eli, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Let's start really high level. How would you describe the evolution of Adobe's AI strategy over the last 5 years?
Uh, Actually, I'd probably go back a little bit further than that. We probably started investing in AI about 10 years ago. I mean, we're a creative media technology company. We've had a research lab building creative technology since the dawn of Adobe, which is, I think, 40 years old now. And about 10 years ago, we saw that AI was becoming more and more of an important piece of how creative workflows were going to happen. It was still in the early ages back then, but we started to invest in it. And then, yeah, about 3 years ago or so, maybe a little bit more than that, was when we started to see the early glimmers of this explosion of generative AI, of this sort of large scale models that could create content in ways that we had never seen before with the previous generations. And so we looked at it and we recognized pretty much right away that like this was going to dramatically change the way content was going to be created. We didn't know what the timeline would be. We probably figured it'd be fits and starts, but this was the future. And so we really took a lot of the pieces that we already had in house, a bunch of world-class vision, computer graphics, and AI researchers, bundled them up with what felt like an eye-watering sum of GPUs at the time, even though it's small compared to what people are doing now, and said, go figure out how we can take this technology that was really cool and doing some great demos, but how can we take it and actually make it something that was useful to the kinds of people who use our creative tools, and something that we could actually integrate into their workflows rather than just a fun demo of type some text into a text box and see an image pop out.
So, can you talk to me a bit about Firefly? And, most companies have really scraped as much data as possible from the internet, largely without permission,
Yeah.
to train their models. I mean, all of the big visual models were built this way, all of the text-based models were built this way. Why did Adobe choose to go a different direction?
Yeah, so like I said, about 3 years ago, we saw the way things were going with this technology. We started looking at what was out there, right? We first started looking at other models that were out in the research field and starting to come into commercial spaces to figure out, was this stuff that we could bring into our tools? And as we looked at the models and we started looking at, talking to customers about it, there were two things that we heard that these models were that made it so these models couldn't be useful for us and for our customers. Number one was, again, like I said, they didn't have the level of control that our creative customers needed. It's type of prompt, get an image. If you don't like it, change your prompt, get a completely different image. But it's hard to get the thing that's in your head. And the second thing, which is really what you're getting at, was there were massive concerns among all of our customers about the way these models were trained. As you said, they all were out there just scraping every piece of data they could find, hoovering up every image on the internet without any thought to where that content came from, who created it, who had rights to it, what that person wanted to do with that image, and how they felt about you using it. And this was a huge problem for our customers, both for our enterprise and our commercial customers, for whom there were all sorts of legal questions around this, around what does it mean if I'm using this? Is that company going to get sued? Am I going to get sued? What happens if content shows up in the images that we create that we don't have the rights to use? So all sorts of uncertainty there. And then obviously questions among our creative customers as well about just what is this doing for the future of creativity and the future of the business of content creation and the ability of creators to make a living off of their own content. And so it was clear from the beginning that those models wouldn't work for our customers. They wouldn't work, frankly, for our employees. Most of us are at this company because we love creating products for creatives. And then we had to go a different way. And so we built Firefly, which is a collection of models. We have an image model, we have a video model, a design model, a vector model. We built all of these models entirely on licensed content. And that's content that we have explicitly bought the rights to use it and train on it. from the creator of the content, or there's some content in there where it is published under a permissive license, where we've looked at it and we have positively identified that we know what the license of this is. We know the license says, yes, go ahead and train on this. So every piece of content in there is something that has been licensed, has gone through review, has gone through human review, not just for is the content, do we have the license on it, but also what is the content of it. So we can get the license to a content for our corporate customers, for our enterprise customers. That's a great first step that they know we licensed it. But if that content has known brands in it, if it has a brand from a competitor, if you're a big soft drink company and a competitive soft drinks company is in the content the model was trained on and is accidentally showing up in the content that you are generating, that is obviously a problem for them. So every piece of content that we train on goes not only through a licensing step, but it also goes through a review step to make sure that no known owned IP is in the training content, and therefore it doesn't show up in the content that the models can create.
That sounds very expensive to painstakingly go through all of this data. So what kind of investment did you make in this? And then I'm curious too about kind of the disadvantages of this approach, because the kind of established wisdom here is that more data equals a better quality image, video, etc. So talk to me about like the process of building these models and how you kind of wrangled with these challenges from a cost perspective and a technical perspective.
Yeah, so the fortunate thing for us is that we've had more than 10 years of preparing for building models like this because of our stock business. So we've had Adobe stock since I think the early teens. I don't remember the exact date. And this process of developing these pipelines for us to go contract with creators, find a wide audience of people who will license their content to us, who can make a living off of licensing content to us, and then putting that through an at-scale moderation process. It's a really important part of the stock business. People come to us and they license stock from us because of those same guarantees, because we actually indemnify them against lawsuits that might arise because they take a piece of content from us that it turns out they don't have the rights to use. And so that same process, that entire machine that we built to be able to do that, is in addition to all the content that we had essentially licensed to do that, served as the basis for the process that we use now to source content for our model training as well. So that made it viable. It is definitely still expensive. We're not sitting on the content we already have. We continue to go out and source more content and build the repository, the library of content that we train on, and fill in gaps and continue to enhance the quality. So it is definitely still work. And to your second question, I'll tell you, when we started the process, we had the same question. We didn't know if it was going to be possible because, like you said, conventional wisdom is more data is better. And so we took a crack at it, and so every step we got, we said, no, we can keep doing this. It turns out that the data we have is good enough now. It's forced us to be more creative about the way we train. There's stories out there that have been in the news recently about models like DeepSeek, right, where everybody talked about how that team operated under heavy constraints, and it forced them to be more creative about how they go about training in those constraints, and they were still able to come out with something just as good. And that's really what we found at the same time, which was by operating under these constraints, we had to get better about thinking about how do we use the content. We do a lot of work where we do content enrichment, content augmentation, where we actually run our content through AI models that add more information, that segment them into different types of content, different levels of quality. And then our scientists and our engineers are artists and wizards about figuring out how to use that content effectively to be able to do more with less. So at the end of the day, content is great. The right content and using it the right way turns out to be more important than just volume of content.
Have you seen, as the product's been out there for a while now, and you're continuing to source images and add to your training corpus, have you seen AI generated images enter that training corpus? And how do you deal with the challenges of making sure, well, I guess, do you try to keep AI generated content fully out of that training corpus? And then if it gets in there, how does that change what the models are able to do? Because it's kind of I know certainly like this is a growing issue, especially as companies run out of data, that they're starting to generate more data. And then you could have what's known as model collapse, where it's like AI feeding on AI, and get stuck in a loop. So I'm curious how you think about this challenge.
Yeah, we don't keep generated content out. It does make it in. We sort of early on with our stock business, we looked at that as just like everybody else was wrestling with, trying to figure out, okay, do we want to keep this out? Do we want to let it in? And the reality is, first of all, there's really no way to keep it out. There's a lot of content out there being created with AI right now, and while we could certainly, we could ask our contributors to sign affidavits to say they're not putting generated content in there, but it would creep in. And so we kind of took the other path and said, we're going to let it in. We're going to ask our contributors to be declarative about whether this was generated with AI or not, because that information is very useful both for our end buyers when they're buying stock and in our training process when we're training on content. But it is part of the training set. It's a small part of it overall, but it is in there. We're still able to sort of deliver those promises that our content is safe for commercial use because that content still goes through the hand moderation. So we still make sure that content doesn't violate our ethical standards, doesn't violate our content standards, doesn't allow IP to sneak in. So even though it may be generated by AI, it still doesn't have that competing brand working its way in there. Well, yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you have some news to share around continuing to open up Adobe's tools to allow your users to access other generative AI tools. Can you elaborate on that and share the latest on that?
Sure. So the main way that our customers interact with generative AI through Adobe's tools is through our flagship tools like Photoshop and Illustrator. We've integrated generative AI deeply into those tools, but also through our website, firefly.adobe.com, which is the main place that people can come to do generation and ideation and sort of start that creative process of obtaining assets or building mood boards on the content they want to use for the next project. Historically, that started with our Firefly models, but we opened that up a few months ago to start allowing third-party models in there as well. As we talked to our customers, what we were hearing from them was, again, for many of them, most of them honestly, the commercially safe guarantee of Firefly was really important for them as it took content to production. But they were starting to use other models with other training policies and other levels of guarantee at other parts of their creative process. And most of the people we talked to were using a mix of them, but we're having to juggle between going to all these different websites and finding those models in different places. And so we responded to that by opening up the website to allow customers to use our models and to use other third-party models as well. We started that with image models from Google and OpenAI. We have Google's Imagine in there. We've got video models from Google like VO2. We've got GPT image in there as well. We've got models from Black Forest Labs, who makes Flux, which is another popular image model in there. And there's been a great response from that. People enjoy using them. There's still a good mix of people who want the commercial safety or people who are doing projects like early ideation where they're okay using other models in those workflows. So next week, we're basically continuing to drive that forward. We're releasing a bunch more third-party models into Firefly. We're bringing in Ideogram, which is a great, more graphic design-oriented model. We're bringing in the video model from Luma, new image model from Runway is a great AI company out there, another video model from Pika, and then latest versions of Imagen 4, Google's image model, new video models. VO3 is going to be coming shortly after that. So yeah, those are the new models coming in there, and they'll be available across the functionality. And also, we're releasing new mobile app into the App Store, so you can do this on the go.
Great, awesome. So I'm curious to talk a little bit more about trust and the kind of sensitivities, particularly if you're talking about, for instance, illustrators who are working in Adobe Illustrator. And there's a lot of concern, of course, like within the creative industry right now about these tools replacing people. And I'm curious, and Adobe has also faced some backlash around changing terms and conditions, and I know the company is kind of clarified. There's no taking of creatives' content and using it to train the model, but there was definitely some backlash there, and I'm curious, kind of how you think about building trust and like the sensitivities when people's jobs are potentially at stake here.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'll actually take the terms of use discussion as a great example. So you're right. There was a blow up. I think it was maybe 6 months ago. I don't remember the exact date. Over the belief that we had changed our terms of use and we're training on our customers' content. The reality was we do not train on customers' content. We have never trained on our content. The backlash is the wrong word because we did not actually change it, and we very much respect our customers in the content they create on. What we did was we innocuously, at least we thought innocuously, changed some little legalese in our terms of use that had nothing to do with how we train, did not in any way change our stance of we do not change on customers' content. But because of the heightened sensitivity we're in, because of the environment we're in, the creative industry is very sensitive and very concerned about all this stuff. And so when some of our customers saw a notice come up that says Adobe's changed their terms of use, people started reading. People who would never read those terms of use before. And they went in and they read over, again, some of the legalese that basically says, hey, in order to provide service to you, we have to be able to analyze your content. You ask us to remove the background from an image, we have to analyze the image to find the background. So it's very standard boilerplate stuff, but these people who are very concerned about this saw that and suddenly misread it and got very upset. And it did create this huge blow up for us over how we use AI, when the reality is we're probably one of the most creator friendly companies out there in how we build our tools and how we think about bringing AI in. So it was a huge lesson for us to think about exactly the question you're asking, which is we have to be much more thoughtful here about how we're engaging with the community, how we're communicating with them, and making sure that as we engage with AI and we bring it into the tools, because like this stuff is coming, right? There's no changing that at this point, unless short of some massive disruption that I can't predict. Our whole focus is, how do we bring this technology into the tools in a way that actually benefits creatives? That is something that accelerates their workflow, takes the boring toil away, rather than takes the fun part, the taste at making and the creativity from their work. How do we focus on doing that? And how do we make sure that we are really actively engaging the community in figuring out how to do that, figuring out what they need, and also communicating really well about what we are doing so that they hear the message and understand not only what we're doing, but what our intent is as well. I'll tell you, 90% of the people who work in the digital media group at Adobe, we're all creatives of some sort or another. Most of us have a creative hobby on the side. We're here because we love creativity and we love supporting creatives. And so the intent is there, but yes, we have to work extra hard to make sure that that's understood at a time when everybody feels like their job is at risk.
Yeah, I guess on that point too, what are you most concerned about? I mean, what do you see as someone who's deeply embedded in this space and has access to a lot of people in this world? What are the biggest concerns, and where do you see this going? I mean, do you think that every artist is going to be out of a job in 10 years
Right.
from now? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
The complicated question, and I have complicated answers. The first thing I'd say is, having worked in this space now for a few years, it's become very clear to me that these models are not creative. They're amazing at doing production work,
Mm-hmm.
and they're amazing at creating content. Either just based on the wisdom of the crowds, they look at what's out there and they create things that looks like what they've seen before, or is inspired by what they've seen before, or based on the input of a human with taste. I've been doing this for years. Like I said, I'm a closet creative. I'm not very good. You put this technology in the hands of a real creative professional, whether it's a graphic designer or an illustrator, and they can make more interesting stuff in 5 minutes than I can after years of doing this. So I truly believe that. What it is forcing us to recognize and to think about is work that we previously thought of as creative Some of that work is really just production work. It doesn't really involve the creativity. And some of that production work, that's how a lot of artists do make their living. It's, they bring their creativity to it, but they also do a bunch of production work as well. And yes, the fear is that as the AI makes it easier and faster for us to do that production work, it'll be harder and harder for people to make a living that way.
And just to clarify, when you say production work, you're talking about the actual drawing of the image itself.
I mean the generating of the image. Again, like you put this technology in my hands, and I can create images that I couldn't create before. That's true. They're not very creative, right? Again, I'm not very good at sitting with a client and understanding what their needs are and taking their brief and coming up with a brilliant, unique idea. That's the creative work. And then iterating on that and looking at the content and figuring out, okay, where do I go from here? How do I take this? I got an initial image, but it could be better or more interesting if I did this. That's the creative work that creatives do, and they're amazing at. And that's not something that the Gen AI can do. That's something the humans do. Now, what the Gen AI can do is, more and more take that input from the human and implement it for you. Take your direction and say, okay, I'll go take it in that direction. So that is definitely happening. It can be a force for good. Like I said, when we make it something controllable and we put it in the hands of professional creatives, they can do amazing things with it. That's the business Adobe's been in for 40 years, AI or not. We make technology that enables the computer to speak the human's language and take direction from the human. This is the next step in it. It's a big step. And yeah, the danger and the risk is it disrupts the value flows in the economic environment that makes it harder and harder for creatives to bring that creativity to bear, because either because they're not able to make the money doing the production work the way they did previously, or because honestly there's so much content being created by Gen AI that the truly creative work gets from humans gets lost in the noise. That's the risk. My optimistic point of view is that that's not going to happen. Years and years ago, when we all got digital cameras in our pockets, my hobby creative skill is photography. I've been a photographer all my life, and I had a photographer friend who, at the time, he told me that he thought the only interesting picture was a picture that really told a great story. And he had lots of thoughts about how you do that. And I thought that was a little bit overblown, that beautiful pictures, pretty pictures are great too. And then we all got phones in our pockets, and we all got social media accounts that gave us this endless flood of photos of pretty pictures, but pictures that didn't tell a good story. They were just pretty. And we all got very inoculated to them, right? We look at them and we say, okay, it's boring. I've seen 1,000 pretty pictures. And as a result, we actually learned to value good storytelling photos even more. And I think that's a transformation that we had to go through with photography years ago. And I think what we'll see is something similar happen here, where yes, there is a flood of AI content that we'll start seeing out there, but we will all start to appreciate and value content that tells a good story and content that is telling a story coming from a human more and more. And I think that act of figuring out what story to tell and how to express it through the content, that is still a creative act, and that's still something that creative professionals will do. And if I'm right, and as consumers, we start to value that more and more, it will raise the bar of what the industry for content or the consumption space for art is. And it will continue to create demand for real artists to create content that humans will appreciate. That's the direction
I very much hope you're right.
Go.
Yeah.
And I'm optimistic and believe it will go in that direction, but we have to work to make it happen.
Great. Eli, thank you so much for your time. This was super interesting.
Sure, it's my pleasure.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for the talk.